All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome. So great to see real people in the room looking back at you. Such a nice feeling. My name is Ana Maria Montero, and I will be your host tonight for a deep dive into the role that the Swiss startups can play in cyber sovereignty and how Switzerland can increase this digital independence and enhance the potential for this local innovation. I'd like to give a special shout out welcome to those joining us online tonight. We can't see you, of course, but you registered, so we assume you're out there, and we're happy to have you along also this evening. Okay, we have an exciting lineup of speakers tonight. We've got a panel, we've got a lot of stuff going on, and of course we're going to be hearing from some of the startups who will be sharing their innovations and their plans. So lots going on, but quickly before we get started, you don't need to wear a mask. Obviously, nobody's wearing one, but you don't need to wear one. But if you should feel like you would like to wear a mask, that's totally OK. And if you didn't bring one, we have some that are actually sustainable, available somewhere, Katka, by the entrance. All right, so we'll find you a mask if you, in fact, decide you want one. OK, and of course, I know you're going to be burning up your social media channels today with impressions, photos, thoughts. So when you do, please use the hashtags. We've got one here, make it happen. Hashtag, very nice. Hashtag Kickstarters21, hashtag cyber sovereignty, or the last one, hashtag SATW event. All right. OK, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce two women who you've probably already met, but without whom this evening could not happen. One of them, Katka Letzing. She is CEO of Kickstarter. Please join me, Katka. She worked in Silicon Valley. Now is when I talk about you with you here. so worked in Silicon Valley for more than a decade on innovation, entrepreneurship, and related topics for the Institute of International Education and in the US Department of State programs / White House initiatives. Just clearing that up, you know. Involving startups and other organizations from more than 170 countries. Since 2013, she has led startup innovation activities in Asia, including engagements with Startup Malaysia, and co-founded a bioactive demo cosmetics startup in Prague, and helped to scale it throughout Europe. She also co-founded and leads Kickstart Innovation, working on innovation with startups and private and public sector organizations. And last but not least, she was awarded for her efforts in diplomacy and innovation by the Department of State, the White House, of course, as well as awarded the distinction of being a Bilanz Digital Shaper in 2019. Katja, you put me to shame. The floor is yours.
No? Yes, can you hear me now better? Cool. I think you heard me though, because I'm quite loud, so I'm just going to continue. So really welcome on the behalf of Kickstart. We're really happy to welcome you here at Kraftwerk, which is our innovation space. And if it's not your first time, welcome back. If it's your first time, we hope to see you here many times in the next 10 weeks as we are hosting the startups now from 20 different countries. And what is Kickstart? So Kickstart Innovation connects corporates and organizations in public sector together with startups, and we create meaningful partnerships. What does it mean for us, meaningful partnerships? It is pilots and commercial projects. Some of them you can see on the market. From some of them you will also hear today their pitches, and I really hope that you can connect and create even more meaningful partnerships and connections. Really happy that this is our 6th year, and we've been around only because of our partners wanted to work, of course, with our startups. And so big shout out to our partner tonight, SATW, but also all of our partners who engage every day with the startups. So thank you so much and have fun, and looking forward to connecting with you during the apéro as well.
Thank you so much, Katka. Please. now I'd like to introduce you to her partner in this event, i.e., as we've said, perhaps her partner in crime. They put all of this together, Nicole Vettstein. Thank you for being up here. Nicole is responsible for the priority program, Cybersecurity and Food 4.0 at SATW. She's been involved in various projects in the cybersecurity field for several years, and is, among other things, Vice President of the Cybersecurity Commission of Digital Switzerland. So, Nicole, on that note, all you.
Thank you very much, Anna Maria. It's my pleasure to give you a short introduction in what SATW stands for and what our activities in the field of cybersecurity are. SATW is the most important expert network in the field of engineering sciences in Switzerland. In our daily work, we can count on more than 400 elected members and experts in the field of engineering sciences. SATW is politically independent and non-commercial. One of the main tasks of SATW is to bridge the gap between science, economy, politics, and society. And on behalf of the federal government, we identify technological developments and inform decision makers about their significance and consequences. As you can see on this slide, SATW is active in other areas of engineering sciences besides cybersecurity. For example, we are committed to an innovative food ecosystem in Switzerland, and we therefore promote technological projects along the whole food value chain. But coming back to the topic of today, to cybersecurity, I'd like to give you some insights in one of the most important projects we are realizing in the field at SATW. And don't mix this up, the cybersecurity map, with the cybersecurity startup map Sandra Tobler will present to you later this evening. In the cybersecurity map, our experts in the field identified 12 technological developments that are of great importance for Switzerland from a cybersecurity perspective. And as you can see on the slides, these technological developments are grouped according to the main field of action our experts see. The main goal of the cybersecurity map is really that decision makers from politics and from economy address tomorrow's cybersecurity challenges already today. And for each of the technological developments, there's available a printable fact sheet where we give some additional information, like the state of the art, the challenges, the need for action, and the recommendation for the decision makers. We invite you to have a look at the cybersecurity map on our website. You can see the link on the screen. And of course, we are interested for your comments and questions on this topic. And as you can see on the screen as well, one of the topics we identified in the cybersecurity map is sovereignty. And this is one of the reasons why we organized this event today, because we think it's really important, and Switzerland discusses this topic even further or even deeper because of the strategic relevance. Yes, thank you very much for being here today. We wish you a very inspiring evening, and yes, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Okay, just quickly before we start with our first speaker, I would like to invite you to hold any questions you might have. So maybe write them down, keep them in mind, until we reach the panel portion, as we won't have Q&As directly after all of the speakers. So just have those in mind for a bit later. All right, and on that note, I'd like to now introduce our first speaker of the evening. It is my pleasure to bring up to the stage Lieutenant General Thomas Süssli, who is Chief of the Armed Forces here at Switzerland. Lieutenant General is responsible for the leadership of the armed forces. He heads the Defense Department and thus reports directly to the head of the Federal Department of Defense, Civil Protection and Sport, who is Federal Counselor Viola Amherd. Lieutenant General Süssli has a background in the financial sector and was, among other things, Head Investment Advisory International at Credit Suisse and CEO at Vontobel Financial Projects in Singapore before joining the Professional Office Corps. What a career. Lieutenant General, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction. Dear host of SATW, dear co-speakers, dear ladies and gentlemen. I actually came here with a hidden agenda. I thought the title of this event is very intriguing and promising. So what I'm really looking for is an ecosystem for cybersecurity in Switzerland. So it's not a hidden agenda anymore, as I was talking about. In my speech, I will first cover the past of cyber at Swiss Armed Forces. So where we started, what we did, where we stand today. Then give you an outlook on what we consider the biggest threats to cyber security for an armed force. Then go into the Swiss startup system and see what is there, what is happening there, and then deduct from what others are doing, giving you one example on what I think should be done in Switzerland. Starting a bit in the past, when did cyber start for armed forces? That was actually in '99. Some of you might remember the NATO operation against that time Yugoslavia, or I should say Serbia. It was called Operation Allied Force. And that was the first time we heard the term cyber in military use, in military terms. There when NATO was conducting big cyber operations against Serbia and the Serbs in reverse against NATO targets. Actually, probably at that time, the cyber, the sophistication of cyber attacks was very low. Those were mainly DDoS, denial of service attacks. Then we also remember 2007, Estonia, Tallinn. The Ests tried to remove a monument out of Tallinn to another place and have been punished by Russia by cyber attacks, DDoS attacks, in a really big scale. And to us, this was the first time in Switzerland we considered then in 2008 we recognized we have to do something on our own. We then founded out of and that's really interesting, out of the cryptology team, founded a MILCERT team. MILCERT stands for Military Computer Emergency Response Team. At the same time, we founded a Computer Network Operations Team. The first one was to defend our own networks. The second one was really to conduct attacks against others. We then, in the following years, started to build a legal framework for that. And today, it's safe to say, that we know what we are allowed to do and in what case. So in a military conflict, we can act on our own. In other situations, we really depend on political decisions. Why did we start out of cryptology? That's very interesting because I think cryptologists, they have something very particular. They have this mind of always trying to crack systems or find weakness in a system. And it's exactly that attitude that was the point to start with. After 2008, we had a steady growth. We built up in MILCERT, in CNO, we built up strong teams. And also interesting, it was never difficult for us to find the right people. You could say, actually, probably in general administration, you're not paying enough, but it's not pay that people come to us. There's more like an intrinsic value, intrinsic motivation. We started at the same time to build a new infrastructure based on 3 data centers. 2 of them are fully robust and protected, some are hidden in the mountains, and I'm not going to tell you where they are. And started also to build a new network, and all over Switzerland, which is really robust and it's power independent. It's the only power independent network in Switzerland. Actually, then cyber grew, and then 2016, the wake-up call came. The wake-up call was the attack against RUAG. What really struck us was that nobody, neither within RUAG nor at Swiss Armed Forces, detected this attack. It was actually a friendly intelligence service who gave us a hint. It was a meeting between intelligence service guys outside Switzerland. And then at the end of the meeting, one of the foreign guys gave us a sheet of paper with an IP address on it and said, have a look at this. So like that, it came that we detected a RUAG attack. At that time, it was already a substantial data breach, and the adversary was in their networks for many months. Also interesting, Switzerland refrained all the time from public attribution. You see other countries, especially the US, always do the attribution publicly and assign blame on other parts. We didn't do that, but what we did, we wrote a detailed report on how this counterparty acted. That report is still available, and it's absolutely worth reading. You will be amazed reading it. Our lesson learned out of that was always assume breach. You are never sure if already someone is in your networks and there is already data flowing out. RUAG, this attack triggered certain changes on our side. First of all, we started a new program to increase our cyber capabilities and capacities. This was called at that time in French, Plan d'Action Cyberdéfense, was a plan for a multiple-year plan, and this is already implemented today and finished. So it's fair to say, at that time, we have been able to hire more than 100 additional specialists in the cyber area and also build up our capabilities. We also started to deep coupling our IT. Before that, we had IT of the administration, of the military administration, and of the army were connected together, so we started to split that. And we also decided to decouple RUAG in two parts, an international part, and the part which is dedicated to Switzerland. The Swiss part is now in our own network, and our MilCert is also protecting them. Then on the conscript system, you must know that Switzerland, we have a conscript system. Every Swiss is obligated to do military service. Some of you might know and have experienced it already. So then 2018, we decided we need an education, also a cyber class for our conscripts. And every year now, we train approximately 50 cyber specialists on our own. They are part of a 40 weeks training, and they have 800 lessons of training in those 40 weeks. So they know what they did when they go home on Fridays. And they're happy when they can do some marching or some sports, because that's really for a change out of their hard learning sessions. After that, they have the chance to do a certificate, a federal certificate as a cybersecurity specialist after this training. So far, we have like 6 classes, conducted 6 classes of them, and the idea is to build up a cyber battalion, and even more, to build up a cyber command by 2014. The legal framework for the cyber command, you might have heard it, just came through federal parliament a few weeks ago. So, also in 2019, we built the Cyber Defense Campus. Cyber Defense Campus, the idea behind was actually to better anticipate developments in the cyberspace and build a link between armed forces, the industry, and science. So that's why Cyber Defense Campus resides at the Federal Institute of Technology at ÖPFL and ETH here in Zurich. And also they do this startup challenge for cyber startups. I think they did it once now, and that's very promising actually, but I'll come to startups later on. So what you see in this whole context, and I'm always saying this, is it's about network. And not the computer network, but that human network. So we consider this the most effective weapon against cyber threats. Network being international with other countries where we exchange, for instance, indicator of compromise, or a network in Switzerland, actually where we include also startups and, as I said before, the federal level. All activities in Switzerland are under the National Cybersecurity Center, which this umbrella includes for public administration or for the federal administration, includes cyber defense as Swiss Armed Forces provides, but also cyber security. And part of that is the Melanie network, the Melde- und Analysestelle federal network. They receive all the messages about threats and actual attacks. I will come back to the numbers a bit later. But they also have their close relation with critical infrastructure. And whenever possible, they would warn critical infrastructure about new actors in the cyberspace or new threats, and also exchange indicators of compromise. Let's look a bit more on the cyber command. So as of today, the IT department, it's called, it's called in German, it's called Führungsunterstützungsbasis der Armee, but that's not very meaningful in English. So it's probably called Command Support Organization of Armed Forces. They do a lot within the administration, and they provide IT services and infrastructure to the to the administration part of our government, but also to the armed forces. And again, that's not very focused. So we decided to split them and build what can be called a lean, mean fighting machine in the cyber room. And the goal is, first of all, was to focus on cyber, firstly, but secondly, then also build this cyber culture. And cyber, I think, in order to be able to attack, you have to be a bit mean. And I think we're just too friendly as of today. So the part is, right now, the project is in the process of building the foundation for this cyber command, including the cyber battalion, but then also more like civilian experts and specialists, and increase especially our capacity, not the capabilities. Compared to other countries or other armed forces, you might ask yourself, where does Switzerland stand? Every year there is it's an exercise, it's called Locked Shields, it's conducted by NATO, and Switzerland has been able for the last couple of years, actually more than 10 years, I think it's more than 10 years, to participate in that exercise. And the good news is we're not neither lagging nor leading, so we're always somewhere in the middle. So that means we have all the capabilities, but then the question, as said before, is about capacity, and exactly that capacity we're going to build with the cyber command. So you could now say that Switzerland or Swiss armed forces are prepared for attacks. We don't think so. We see an exponential growth in cyber threats. And the number of incidents reported to NCSC or Melanie last year, there were 10,800 cyber incidents reported to Melanie in 2020. This year, by now, it's more than 13,000. So the year has not even ended, and we see a substantial growth. Most of these incidents are fraud, but there are also a few data breaches every month. And what we also see, and this is a bit of a concern, we see a criminal cyber ecosystem growing. So it's a separation of work between those who do the first attack, intrude the system, prepare an attack, and then they would sell this attack to the ransomware, to the ransomware guys. So and really this is a criminal ecosystem we see growing here. The question is then, what we had in the past, is this enough for the future? And also one of the big concerns is artificial intelligence in cyber. And you might remember the good old Sergio Leone movies, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So in artificial intelligence, we see also good, bad, and ugly. Good is using artificial intelligence to detect intruders. That's the good part of artificial intelligence. The logic there would just look for patterns which are not normal and then create alerts. The bad is using artificial intelligence to break hash codes. That's our passwords. That's something we see more often. And then the ugly part of artificial intelligence in cyber is using AI actually to do advanced persistent threats. And that's what normally an APT takes 2 or 3 weeks or 2 to 3 months minimum to conduct. And with AI, we see the same happening in a few hours. So that's really what we see at the end now of the development right now. And also in military terms, I hear very often, we don't need fighter aircrafts or tanks anymore. The new threat is cyber. That's not true, because cyber actually is not going to replace the existing threats, but the contrary is true. It makes them more dangerous. So as for many organizations, innovation, and innovation is really needed here to counter those threats, innovation is very difficult to us. First of all, in public administration and armed forces, we have a very, let me say, a slow culture, a culture that does not allow for errors. So we have no learning spirit, no learning culture. And as many big companies, we are really dependent on startups to innovate. So I can actually already answer one of the questions. Yes, the future for us for innovation in cyberspace are startups. Looking at the Swiss startup scene, first, the good news, 1.7 billion has been invested in startups only this year by now. This is record-breaking, and it's more than twice than last year by now. But the majority goes in biotech, which is not bad as such, but doesn't help us as armed forces. what we see is more and more startups, it's easy to get fools, family and friends to get invest into your company, but as soon as they're broke, you have to look for new investors. And what we see is it's very difficult to get scale-up money or expansion money. And there is no real culture for that, or like not enough investors for that. So startups actually would have to sell the company in order to grow and get expansion money in the area then of 30 to 50 million. We see a lot of them selling, and right now in this year, out of 24 startups who sold their company this year, 20 went outside Switzerland and have been bought by foreign investors. Famous examples might be Binary Edge or Meeple. So seeing 300 startups founded per year, that concerns us that some of them or most of them finally ultimately are sold to investors outside Switzerland. So by that we lose jobs in Switzerland, we lose tax money, and and that's most importantly, we lose know-how in Switzerland. So we're not getting the maximum of our startups here. Question is now, what do others do in this area? And when we talk about cyber startups, we have to look at Israel, obviously. Israel, I would say there are two different systems. One is the Beersheba system, and the other one is a company called Team 8. Beersheba, there's a lot of state money flowing into it, and Israel, I'm not sure about the size, it's still the same, but used to have a 12 billion VC capital fund investing startups. So there is a lot of interconnection there between academia, government, industry, and the Israel Defense Forces in that area. That might be a role model, but I think we as Swiss, we are a bit more risk averse, and we don't have this real startup culture, or not enough startup and investment culture, as I said before. There's another example, and this is Team 8. And now I come to the conclusion and to what I actually think we should start thinking about in Switzerland. What Team 8 does, they have a group of possible investors and companies with issues in the cyberspace. So what they do, they bring them together and ask them, what do you need in cyberspace? What are your threats? What do you need from us? They would take some ideas, take them back, those ideas, and check if they can find solutions for that. If they find solutions, they go back to the group and say, okay, those were your issues, your problems. We found that solution. Do you want to bring it forward? If those investors or future investors would say yes, they look for a CEO for a startup would take the guy that solved the problem, take him out in a startup and found a company out of that. And that's exactly what I think could work in Switzerland. We saw before on this nice map here with the ecosystem here in Switzerland, or the startup ecosystem. We could use an organization like Digital Switzerland, bring them together, ask them about their issues in cyber, what problems they need to be solved. Then we could use our own network. I mentioned before the Cyber Defense Campus at the Federal Institute of Technology, find some techie guys who can solve those issues, go back to Digital Switzerland, tell them, those were your issues, we found a solution, are you willing to invest? And then take that guy who solved the problem, found a company, found a startup, because we have enough money actually, also in armed forces, we are ready to invest or willing to invest some money in that, found a company, and like that build an ecosystem for Switzerland. Because we're risk averse, we always start with clients, with customers, build the solution, create in an incubation platform, create a startup that solves that solution. So, bringing that all together, in Switzerland we have the risk capital, but it's not used enough for startups. We have a lot of entrepreneurship, we have a lot of smart minds in Switzerland, but we need to bring it all together in a new ecosystem to protect our infrastructure and armed forces. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yes, perfect. Thank you so much. So interesting. I already have a question for you later, Lieutenant General. All right. Our next speaker of the evening is Ms. Sandra Tobler. Where is she? She is co-founder and CEO of Future Technologies. In this company, they aim to make sure end-user authentication for customer portals and transaction signatures for payments for payments and for user interfaces. Sandra has worked in the IT industry for many years and is a passionate entrepreneur. She has worked on large international IT projects at IBM, both domestically and internationally. And among other accolades, in 2020, Sandra was named for the third time in a row one of Switzerland's 100 digital shapers. Please welcome to the stage, Sandra Tobler. Oh, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It's a great pleasure being here. Mr. Lieutenant General, it's a great pleasure that we can share some thoughts with you tonight. I think it's a very important topic to bring together the ecosystem. So my name is Sandra Tobler. I have the trajectory of a founder in cybersecurity myself. As I was kindly introduced, I have a cybersecurity in strong authentication, so we do secure any sort of user interaction that citizens or banking customers or retail customers need to make it more seamless, but in a secure way. We have come a long way, 4.5 years, have now global operations with over 100 customers, but it was not all that easy. And I would tonight not so much talk about my company, that I'm of course extremely passionate about, but another topic that I'm extremely passionate about, which is how should we strengthen our local cybersecurity ecosystem. And so why do we need actually a cybersecurity ecosystem? So on the one hand side, I think it's obvious. We do have all ingredients, and this is no news to everyone. We are super well ranked in any sort of international university rankings. We are really in the top league when it comes to computer science. We do have a dual education system. So we not just have talent here, born and raised, but we have the best of the world that come here and want to build something, and after studying, try to create value for the larger economy. Also, we all know we have a big issue with lack of talent. So even though we have such tremendous, interesting brains, it's not enough. We know we have increased digitization that trickles down to different areas of society, and where you digitize processes, you also generate sensitive user data, and you, in the end, also need to protect it adequately. Unfortunately, we have in the news almost every week some major data breaches or DDoS attacks affecting really core of our society. So another reason why we absolutely need a local ecosystem is Switzerland is a brand that is still very strongly recognized abroad. We are not known for offensive operations, and this is something we can make use of. So this trust label that we have across different industries like banking, which again, most of the times abroad is even perceived more positive than we do it ourselves, is a big asset. Also, when you look at the data from the Swiss Startup Radar, per capita, we actually do already have quite interesting amount of creations of startups in the space of cyber. So we don't have to hide at all what is already there. Now, what is missing? Why don't we have these amazing success stories we read on a daily basis of IPOs in NASDAQ? We had some other topics lately, but why are we not familiar with successes abroad? So I will shed some light on journeys that me personally have experienced, but I think a lot of my co-founders, specifically in cybersecurity, have come across. So the typical myths when you start a company, and the typical myths where you're confronted when trying to win the first customers. Number one, will they manage to deliver on time and in budget? So let's look at some data. 68% of all IT projects fail, like miserably. reasons for that are manifold, like mission creep, bad requirements, bad communication, governance, like the classical ones. Is it really more likely that a startup will fail an IT project in the beginning? I would claim no, because the motivation and the stakes in the game are a lot higher. So you can imagine when a team, an early stage startup starts in the venture, they have only an amount of limited resources. So the things they focus on, they need to fly. So they can't afford to fail. So you can be 100% sure they will make anything in their power to make sure the thing works. Myth number 2, will they be around in 5 years? I also try to dig out some numbers here. When you look at the spin-offs coming out of the computer science division of ETH Zurich, where the latest numbers were released last year, 93% of all the technology spin-offs are still around after 5 years. Of course, this is not a typical, I would say, average in startups. It's a very, very, very high number, but still it's something to prove what comes out is really good. And there is a really high likelihood that what comes out is actually still going to be there in even more years than 5 years. Also, what gives one the security that technology of large companies are still around? Like Google is an example. They all the time let products die, but because it's a good thing, they want to kind of bring life cycle, new ideas, and if something is not working out over time, they let things die. RSA is another example where they were confronted with major data breaches. So also some things die, even they have large labels connotated to them. Other myth, will the talent pool be big enough? I mean, why don't we work with the big names? Also here, I would claim that you most probably find the most interesting know-how, knowledge in one specific vertical by working with a cybersecurity startup. Because these people are specialists, they're obsessed by solving a specific problem, and they really want to go deep and solve your problem. And you can, let's say, worst case scenario, you have a collaboration with a company that will not materialize for whatever reason, and the company will go bust. You might have even a possibility to hire talent because you have already existing relationships. So from that point of view, it's also a possibility to think ecosystem differently and bring people that are smart close to your organization in one way or the other. And nobody has ever been fired to engage a large, big brand, but next time some of you have a budget responsibility dedicated to large, big consulting paper mandates, please also maybe just a fraction of that amount try to engage with a security startup. Other myth that we have come across quite a bit, we can do it ourselves. So we are used to work with firewalls, with spam filters, with some very commonly known security products. But in our space, everyone always thinks they can build authentication themselves. I think cybersecurity, we heard it before a bit, it's such a fastly evolving topic. Not just the threat models change all the time. The criminals we're fighting against, they're way more professional than many of organizations that we work with. And it's illusionary that you can build something and then it's working and you can tick a box. So you have to think product innovation a lot more in terms of how is our operating system evolving, how are fraud models evolving, how are criminals adjusting to new situations. And also when you build your own security, you have a big risk of turnover of staff. So although you have some smart people that are capable, if you lose them in your organization, it's game over and you're sitting on some legacy products that nobody knows how to deal with. So in a nutshell, how is it to be a founder in Switzerland? We heard some of the topics a bit before. I think one of the issues that I think is really big, there is no mentality to work with early stage companies. So while everything that comes out of Stanford is looked at and everyone is proud to early engage with those companies. I think in Switzerland we don't have that. People are going to scout abroad in the Bay Area for latest technologies all over the world, but they would not look really what is happening at home. Other major issue is that B2B is very strong in Switzerland, so many innovation companies are in this specific space, not in consumer, but really in B2B. They're traditionally you have long sales cycle, but cybersecurity you have even longer sales cycles because it's just a process of due diligence, of pen testing, of all those sort of things that security products have to go through. So this is also making it a lot more difficult in the early days, and you are more likely inclined to raise money where other companies don't raise money because again it's so slow that you can find some market traction. And another topic is definitely the maturity of the market. We don't have virtuous cycles of startups that have successfully grown to successful international companies that have exited abroad and are reinvesting their knowledge and money to teach the next generation. So we have a handful of those successes, but we're really in the early shoes when it comes to this ecosystem. So I think for all of that, you see a bit why I'm so passionate. There is so much potential, and it's a topic we all agree will win more importance, even more so. The more sensitive the applications are we talk about. And what I kept hearing a bit throughout my journey in cybersecurity is that we don't even know what is out there. So that's why together with some colleagues like Tobias Grimm and Nick Mayancourt, who are also here, we have launched a map, which is basically an inventory for local cybersecurity product innovation. So it's an inventory, the cybersecurity startup map that helps decision takers to see what know-how is there in the different verticals, and also it helps to really navigate and get more information about where they stand and what type of know-how and support is that they also require or where they look to join forces. So please look at it, please consult it. I think it's a great initiative, and whenever customers of mine come with the paper, I'm really proud when they try to tell me what this initiative is about, because it's really, I see that in the industry it's already used. And if ever there is some strong asset we have, it's really trust in Switzerland. And I'm grateful for initiatives also from the armed forces, bringing back the puzzle pieces closer, because we need not only academia, we need also successful growth technology companies, SMEs, and of course, ideally, hopefully at one point, some very successful international tech companies. So with that, thank you very much, and looking forward to this.
Thank you so much, Sandra. Okay, so moving on now to our next speaker of the evening. Sandra briefly introduced him because they've worked together, but Nicolas Mayancourt, he's the founder and CEO of DreamLab Technologies. Nicolas belongs to the first generation of cybersecurity experts in the world. He has a strong vision for cybersecurity for our society, nations, and the economy, and is now successfully active in this field on 4 continents with DreamLab. He defined cybersecurity standards in the early 2000s, which are now also part of ISO 27001. He is a member of the World Wide Web Consortium and a founding partner and program director of the Swiss Cybersecurity Days. A warm welcome now to Nicolas Mayancourt.
Thank you so much for this fantastic introduction. I'm almost blushing here. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for this opportunity. So I'm supposed to talk about the success story, but I came to the conclusion I can't, because on one hand, we have too many of them, and on the other hand, we are missing the one big thing, and I would like to talk with you about that. So first of all, DreamLab Technologies, yes, I've been one of the first generation security entrepreneurs, if you will. The real story is I was a young guy believing in this technology, believing that this will make a huge change to the world, trying to find a way to study information security in '94, just didn't work. Then trying to do the same at the army, it just didn't work. They put me to a psychiatrist, and then they said, I'm just insane. They don't need yet any hacker. This is the reason why I had the pleasure to actually found this company in '96, and it was registered in '97. So this is me being also a startup, or having gone through the startup pains in Switzerland that weren't very easy, as we have heard earlier. I also had the pleasure to co-found the Swiss Cybersecurity Days. This is yet another spotlight on the Swiss market, and it's meant to actually animate a societal conversation about the importance, the risks, and the chances of cyber for the non-experts, for the politicians, the regulatory makers, the board levels, and the C-levels. This in itself is also a Swiss startup. It's very young. We only had it 3 times. We are looking forward to the 4th edition next year. Some impressions. We are actually overwhelmed with the support that we are getting for the Swiss Cybersecurity Days, and we believe this may be a blueprint for a new generation of Swiss cybersecurity companies starting up. So it's only 3 years, and it's pretty atypical. We had everybody supporting us, and we are so thankful for this, and we see that the need is seen and shared and supported for the first time. We also co-founded, thank you so much for the introduction, the Swiss Cybersecurity Startup Map, because we truly believe that in Switzerland we have a huge, vast pool of smart cookies, smart brains, innovative people and innovative companies that lack visibility, that lack market access, that are not being seen, and that was the reason why we have created this startup map, to discover that we have a lot already ongoing in Switzerland, and we don't need to go to the Bay Area. We have it actually right across the corner. Some background here. Our country competitiveness, Switzerland, is usually in the innovation indices and competitiveness indices, ranking amongst the top 5, top 3, or even number 1, depending on who makes the statistics. We have all the reasons to be super proud of that, and it's actually really true. We are competitive, and we are truly highly innovative. Why is this? We have true smart brains, we have true innovation, we have a huge bag of capital, we have the means to be doing that, we can afford it, we have a lot of research and development ongoing, we are known for high precision, high quality, and yes, we are independent, we are neutral, we do not participate in this geopolitical area, and we are known from the banking industry as well to be a trustworthy and trustful partner. Those are key ingredients that make this ranking, this top ranking, a reality. I believe for 7 consecutive years that has been the number 1 place, and we have all the rights and means to be proud of our country that we are here. Just one of the proof points, the federal government sustainability strategy strongly benefits of this. Everything else benefits of this as well. Smart brains, innovation is the fuel for a new and better future. We have many examples in that. Now when we get to cybersecurity, there is the ITU, the International Telecommunication Union, that is doing the cybersecurity index since a couple of years and is ranking the cyber preparedness for each countries. And here, unfortunately, we are not leading. We are somewhere mid-range on position 42. And by the way, we declined. In the first cybersecurity index, we have had rank number 17, and over the last 5 years, we just went down to 42, just after Azerbaijan, Serbia, Wonderful countries, but I believe it's not the place where we should be, bearing in mind the high potential, the high innovation that we do have here. I believe that this could be a danger for future growth and future innovation for Switzerland. So clearly, Swiss cybersecurity has room to improve, should improve, and we actually have lots of means. So why is it not happening? Anyway, who is going to win in today's society? This is the question that we will need to ask ourselves. Who is going to win in a digitized world, in a new modern world? For sure, we need competitiveness, but we also need growth, and we need to be able to control our key technologies. It always needs two in cybersecurity. We've seen cybersecurity incidents on a stark rise. Ransomware attacks, no matter what statistic you consult, you see a explosive growth in attacks, in successful attacks, as well as in damages that are being reported. I say we always need two, because of course the criminal is a criminal, the attacker attacks, but when you use the default password from the installation manual, you make their lives just much too easy. And that's where we, as a society, are just simply lacking behind. I wouldn't even call this high-end security. I would call this basic hygiene that we should already apply in order to not see such things. And yes, we do lag behind. Those are proof points. We can read them on an everyday basis. No matter which vertical we're looking at, we have a substantial lag behind the attackers. They are faster, they are more sophisticated, they are driving this game for now. Why is it? It is simply easy money. It is simply a very powerful and efficient instrument. Today's criminals, why should they rob a bank when they can just send you an email? Today's espionage, why do I need to create an operation when I can just send an email? That's what is happening today. So how do we improve? How do we get a balance in this equation? How do we get up from 42 to somewhere on the top 10 or top 20, I believe would be sufficient to be proud? I believe we should reinforce and strengthen what we already have. And what do we lack to do that? If I look at it, actually, we're lacking nothing. We have truly inspiring, innovating brains. We have capital. We have research facilities. We have a stable political environment. We have a wonderful infrastructure. We have everything that is needed. All the key ingredients are here. And yet again, what we hear from startups, from early startups, it is very hard to get money. It is very hard to get money for growth. It is very hard to conduct business. I believe we have a lack of, or we should question ourselves about this culture, as Sandra has rightly said. Why should you not trust the startup to take the task? They have everything at stake. They will do everything that is virtually possible to fulfill your need, even more than any other big brand. I believe as well, maybe we need some kind of a Swiss proudness, pride of ourselves. We can be proud of all those innovations, and we should talk about that. We should share that more, and we should let such companies grow and make our country doing an impact globally. We have heard, yes, they are there. Yes, they are fantastic. Yes, they're amongst the top 10. We should do more out of that in a commercial sense, and we should not repeat what we've done in the last years, just seeding a little bit, nurturing the idea. Once it works, the Smart Bay Area comes, buys it off and scales it to hell, makes a huge profit, and we lose two things, as you have rightly said. We lose the money, but more importantly, the control and the capability, and we get dependent on others. We do also have great initiatives. This is one amongst many. I'm just particularly proud Swisscom does that as well, and some companies have won on our cybersecurity startup map. Congratulations, some of them are here. So To sum it up, too often Swiss cybersecurity startups are not being trusted, are not being granted a trial, are not being helped, are not being propelled. And I believe, to put it in a word, we should have more courage and we should be more bold about what we are doing. Not only Israel and the Americans are doing good things, we as well are doing good things, and we should be proud about it. Needless to say, one of my beloved startups, the best startups on this map, Future A, she was here. Congratulations. She has taken this path as well, and she has shared with me that it wasn't easy. She has shared it with you as well. It takes so much dedication and pain resistance to go through that very, very long road to get where she has come. We have to thank her that she has taken this. In other countries, it would have been a much easier experience, a much more enjoyable experience. And I think we are here to start to change this and to accommodate young entrepreneurs and help them living a easier path to build up their companies. So as a conclusion, let us please stop being naive about innovation. Let us please not only invest our money in fundamental research and then let other companies buy it off our country and make the profit. Let us take this action. Let us start being bold about what we have and try to grow it in Switzerland. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your insights. All right, and our last speaker, or our final speaker this evening, is Henri Dubois-Ferrier, InnoSuisse expert and founder of 12th Avenue Labs. He's an accomplished ICT professional with business and technology experience, spanning Switzerland and Silicon Valley. He has experienced all stages of the startup life cycle, so early stage growth, pre and post IPO. Henri, please welcome, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. I'm delighted to be here. I'm here really in two connections to the event. The first one, as was mentioned, was that I've been active in startups for many, many years, almost too many. Many of those in San Francisco, founded a company there. But since coming back to Switzerland, I've had the privilege and honor to serve at InnoSuisse in a role of expert. I will explain a little bit more what that means, and that is the reason that I'm here. So I'm here to give a perspective from InnoSuisse as someone who's involved in the InnoSuisse ecosystem on how InnoSuisse can participate and help support not just startups and innovation in general, but cybersecurity in particular. So let me start off with the mandate. This is kind of the mini constitution of InnoSuisse. InnoSuisse is an agency that is part of the Swiss Confederation. It is part of that domain. It's a separate entity, but it's a public body. And InnoSuisse's mission is to promote science-based innovation in the interest of the economy and society, important conjunction here, across Switzerland and in all disciplines. So I'll refer to this a few times because it's a seemingly general and straightforward statement, but a lot of InnoSuisse's activities really map very nicely back to this starting point. So maybe first a little word about the structure, how InnoSuisse is organized, and this will also help me show where I fit in a small part of this big diagram. I think one of the things that I've really appreciated serving as part of InnoSuisse is that it's a very decentralized organization. It has at its core, and this is the yellow circle on this diagram, a body of full-time people full-time employees who work for InnoSuisse in Bern, pandemics and other such things permitting, at the office, and who are really the operational body that keeps the wheels turning, that runs the processes, that runs the administration in a very lean and efficient way, if I may say, from the perspective I have, which is of an expert. So there's well over 100 experts, quote unquote. You know, the word is word may or may not be the right one, but there's over 100 people, such as myself, who continue to have a primary activity in the real world and who help assess, evaluate cases, weigh in on decisions, talk to startups, talk to projects, evaluate them, and make funding decisions. Above that, there's a body which is the Innovation Council, which oversees the pool of experts, and we have one member here, Massimo Lucchina, as it happens, and there are people who help with coaching. I think the key point here, which is that Suisse is really organized in a sense like a civilian militia, which taps into a large number of people from industry, from startups, from research, from academia, to do all of the concrete assessing and applications that it needs to be done. So I think that's a very nice model for these types of public entities and allows it to be lean and, as I said, efficient. Suisse has a number of programs, and I'm not going to walk through each of these right now. I think what I'd just like to highlight is that there are programs that are geared specifically towards startups, and there are also programs that are geared towards helping innovation outside of startup contexts. And this maps back to the mission statement, which was really about promoting innovation. And of course, a large part of that is in startups, but some of it is also targeted towards the existing industrial and economic tissue and ecosystem where existing non-startup large companies, SMBs, small companies can benefit from innovation in their own domains. Another point that is worth highlighting here before we dig in more into cybersecurity related cases is that Suisse is not specifically about, of course, cybersecurity. It is not even specifically about IT or ICT. Again, back to the mandate, promote science-based innovation, and the science-based part here is important, means that Suisse ends up supporting life sciences projects, startups and other projects, science and engineering, environmental engineering, and ICT is just one of these. So I won't go further on specifics of Suisse. I'll move on to a couple of case studies. I'll just point out for anyone here who might be in an organization and who might be wondering if there are programs of interest to them with Suisse, there's a nice web resource, innosuisse.guide, that will do a much better job than I will tonight of walking you through, if you're interested, the various programs, what is offered, how the programs work, how do you apply, and so forth, if that may be relevant. Now, in the final part of this brief presentation, I'd like to go over two case studies, and I'd like to illustrate, really I'll be illustrating a few different things here. One is, and this is consider it a random sampling of interesting cybersecurity startups that are supported by Suisse. It is not the only one. They are not the only ones. There are many more. I think some of the ones that were shown on the startup map previously, definitely some of those also have been or have Suisse support. These are just two that came up, and it'll highlight some of the nice things we have going on in cybersecurity startups in Switzerland. So the first one is a company that's based in Yverdon, Strong Network. I'm not here to do a pitch on behalf of the company, but I'll just summarize briefly the problem that I think what's really interesting here is the problem that they were founded on to try to address. And this problem is really in the broad realm of computer security and data security, which is that as organizations go increasingly towards remote work, and this company was founded a year ago. It was ideated, I think, probably before COVID, but it had good timing in that sense, because COVID has only accelerated this move to remote work. But as we have more and more remote work, especially or in large part in IT-related disciplines, whether it's IT development, data science, coding, access to data, when employees or consultants or contractors are remote, it can pose a problem of trust, of jurisdiction issues if these employees or participants are outside of the country. And if you are in a domain in particular that is handling sensitive data and sensitive matters, then that creates a problem. So Strong Network has an approach to allow this work to be done in a way that minimizes to a large extent the possibility of data exfiltration. So this is not really about breaches, more about active exfiltration. And they have been in Suisse in the startup coaching program of Suisse, which is a program that gives startups, and this one is specific to startups, access to a wide pool of coaches, again in this Suisse militia system. These are not full-time members of the administration in Bern. These are people who are active in the real world, a separate body than the experts to prevent conflicts of interest. And Strong Network has been admitted into this program, and they can leverage these experts both as a startup founder to have experienced people to go to with all the different questions and challenges and problems of the day, or problems of the month if it's more strategic, as well as more pointed IP strategy, legal issues, and such support. So that's one example. They're doing well. They're a one-year-old company. I think they're definitely worth watching, and I hope they'll be a nice member of this slide and develop soon. The second one is Exeon, and I believe that they're presenting in a later part in the startup pitch. Yes. So I'm not going to describe too much other than to say that Exeon is active in network visibility and threat detection. But I'll talk a little bit about the InnoSuisse program that supports them. I think this one is also very interesting. It used to exist in the form of CTI grants, and then has evolved as InnoSuisse came about in the last few years. So innovation projects are a program where InnoSuisse supports a project between a private company, or actually it could also be a foundation or association, but it is most cases a company. That couldn't be a startup, but is also often a large or a non-startup company, large or small. And a research entity in a university, ETH, EPFL, or University Fachhochschule. In this case, this project is with the Zurich Fachhochschule. And when a company has a problem or research area that they'd like to dig into, but they're not necessarily going to conduct the research themselves, if they find a group in a university to do this with, InnoSuisse supports the research financially by funding the research component of this in the public research institute. And this is a very nice program because it allows, it encourages really leveraging the research capability we have in the country and feeding researchers with real world problems, and vice versa, helping companies upgrade or stay current with the latest research. So that's the second case from Exeon. I think I will leave it at that, just to say that InnoSuisse is really doing its best to support innovation in startups and outside. And we have some examples here, and I'll be happy to say more later in the panel. And I think I'm the last speaker between the panel and you, so I'll thank you and leave it here. Thank you.
Henry, but yes, do stick around. We are going to add you to the panel as soon as we get some chairs up on the stage. We're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to have you come down. Those of you that are standing up, if you'd like to now take a seat for the panel, please feel free. If not, of course, feel free to continue standing. No problem. But there are plenty of seats available. And that was quick. Wait, we're missing one. And a table. Very nice. So I'd like to invite, meanwhile, our speakers back to the stage. Please, Sandra, Henri, Nick, and Lieutenant General Süssli, please. Doesn't matter. Pick a chair. Great. I just sit on the one on the end, that's all. That's all I know. Please. All right. Would anybody like a glass of water? Anybody need a drink of water? No? Everybody good? Yeah? Okay. All right. Just asking. Making sure we're all comfortable. We've heard so many, just so many, my notes, so many interesting insights from each of you, all the unique perspectives from your different experiences. Of course, some overriding themes, right? Things that concern all of you, right? Which is the talent leaving Switzerland, the money not inflowing, the need to change cultures and mindsets and this sort of thing. So definitely some challenges ahead, and we'll get into that. But I wanted to start with this idea of, there are no physical borders to the internet, right? And Switzerland is dependent on companies like Google and Amazon. But today one of the topics that we were looking at is Switzerland being sovereign in certain areas of software and hardware. So how does that work? I mean, is that a contradiction? Want to take that, Nick? Or not? You don't have to.
I'd be very interested to hear you as well. Yes, it's true. I mean, the cyberspace actually permitted all dimensions and controls them. And actually, cyber doesn't end at the border of your country. And yes, it's true. Unfortunately, we do not have the Microsofts, Amazons, and Googles in country. And this is actually a serious question. How is our jurisdiction compatible with the US Patriot Act? I'm asking myself, how does this work? If I read that, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a layman here, but what I get out of that with the Cloud Act, that basically the US can use and leverage their economical tissue to get data internationally. So I ask myself, okay, if we all use those products here, we may be part of US territory. And this may be a question worth actually exploring if that is really true, to what extent and what we should do about that. Because true sovereignty, to me, means that you're able and capable to manage your own life and reduce your dependencies, and you are able, even in a, let's say, in a conflict, to continue doing your business. And with such stark dependencies, I would raise the question, are we actually capable of living up to that paradigm? And I believe that not. And what we're also seeing is that International Geneva has woken up, so to say. They are discovering this field now as well. So there is an institute called the Cyber Peace Institute, and there are endeavors to bring up a Cyber Geneva Treaty, driven by the World Economic Forum, by the World Bank, the Cyber Peace Institute. So these topics right now are being put on the global agenda, rightfully so. And I just heard from our Foreign Department, EDA, that they have advantages in cyber policy making internationally. So there is a model that is being discussed on an international level, that when you actually have Swiss data in Singapore, that the Swiss jurisdiction will apply. Don't ask me how this practically will turn out, but lawyers are now thinking about it.
A team of lawyers behind that, for sure. Did you have something you wanted to add, Lieutenant General?
I mean, speaking on cyber sovereignty, I don't think there is such a thing in the Western Hemisphere. I think the only countries which can really implement cyber sovereignty are countries like China, which implemented the big firewall, not the big wall, but the big firewall, or Russia, or maybe other countries. But for Switzerland, that's very difficult. I think the minimum we have to achieve is get some knowledge in cyberspace or in cyber companies in Switzerland, but also in cryptology. I think cryptology becomes more important for banks, for the government, and that's an area which should really look at. But the rest of it, I'm really pessimistic. This is something we can achieve.
Do we need it?
Good question, actually. I mean, Switzerland depends really on being open and exchange data and information. It's a flow of data, it's a flow of services. So do we really need it? Not in all areas, but in specific areas we need it. And we should really focus on those areas and not try to achieve something which is not realistic and not feasible.
All right. Anything, you guys? All right, so as we think a little bit about moving on then a little bit to the startup ecosystem, which we've talked a lot about tonight in all of your diverse experiences. We're going to be hearing from our startups. In your opinion, for example, Sander or Henri, in which of these, there's need for cybersecurity innovation across the board, right? But what are the critical areas where Switzerland should develop its own software?
I'm going to think as I speak. I think that overall, I don't know if I would describe it so much as a specific area of cyber. At least I wouldn't know the requirements. I think that, as has been said many times tonight, I think we have the technical, definitely the technical capability, the entrepreneurial drive. One thing which coming back from many years in Silicon Valley was quite different here. And I think events like this one are one part of what's changing this, was the difference in which the ecosystem, the one that I knew was Silicon Valley and San Francisco, how things were densely connected in the sense that when you start a company there, at least if you're there, very quickly people are very willing to introduce you to other, both to anyone that could be relevant, whether it's potential co-founder, employee, investors. And there's a lot of networking and dense communication, and also lateral across groups. Investors talk to each other a lot. They share leads. They want to know what's going on. They want to know what's the latest hot thing. And I think this probably goes in the theme of what was discussed tonight, which is that when I first came 5 years ago, it felt like there was not that level of chatter, and that it may seem anecdotal, but I think it's a really essential part to network this and to allow also former founders who've had success who have experience. We have some here to share that with young companies, and we have some of this going on. But I think this can and should be a lot denser. But we're getting there slowly. It's a cultural thing to a large extent. This is not probably the primary attribute of Swiss culture, but I think it's important to get an ecosystem like this and to help it really accelerate its development.
And what did you want to add? Please go ahead. No, okay. But then I have a question for you, though, Sandra. So what could be then, again, addressing this topic, which seems to keep coming up, is, how do we keep the startups from migrating abroad? You have to bolt them down to Swiss soil. How do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be realistic. We are a small market in sheer size. Nevertheless, having early adopter customers, I think, is the key to any success. Like, it can be, again, early feedback early on by industry representatives. Really blunt feedback sometimes. This doesn't really make sense. This doesn't solve any problem. This doesn't add value, but having really a straight conversation, and as Henry mentioned, opening doors. Maybe look, for us this is not interesting, but how about do you talk to colleagues or peers in the industry that might be very interested in an exchange? This can be really the critical component why someone is managing to win this first reference customer or not, or has to stop the venture. I think this is a bit what makes it extremely difficult to start in an area like cybersecurity, because then you heavily have to rely on outside funding that wouldn't be required if you can make your own market. And everyone wants to see traction early on. And in that respect, I think that's the most valuable an early stage startup can get, customers.
Okay. Please.
Can I add something on this topic? So I'm going to take maybe a controversial stance here, and this is definitely on my personal behalf, not on Suisse. I think we often hear, and I really understand the perspective, but some regret being expressed when Swiss startups are acquired by overseas entities. And I'd like to say, in many cases, it depends on each situation, but in many cases, on the whole, I think this is a very good thing. It's a positive thing for an ecosystem that's growing. And the reason for that is, of course, if we're talking about a two-person project of, rocket scientists that came out of a top research group that are just barely starting a company and they get snapped up by Google and moved to California, no, that's not a positive development. But if we have a company that's further along, that has already come to market, that has a reasonable size, I know from having been on the other side, having been on the side of a California-based company that came to scout potential acquisitions in Europe, that when those acquisitions happened, a large part of the goal here is to expand the acquiring company's portfolio. It's also to acquire talent, and that talent is really, on the whole, never let go. It is never made to move. The core talent, the founders, the entrepreneurs, the engineers, all of that is kept and nurtured. At least it should be, and it usually is. And if not, yes, there's a problem. Now, that shouldn't be, of course, a goal for forever. I think, and I think we start to see this. Of course, we want to get to a point where we have companies that get big enough to go all the way to public exits or so forth. But a certain amount is healthy. There's just unfortunately not enough potential acquirers in Switzerland of, at least at mid-large sizes of technology companies. So I think it's healthy. I think thinking of Israel that was mentioned, which of course is different, but Israel is so densely connected to the United States technology scene. Switzerland doesn't have at all necessarily to follow that path, but it's benefited tremendously from that. So I think when companies do get acquired, that there are still lots of positive fallout. The acquirers then go on maybe to found the next company and go much further, or to help the ecosystem. So there's still some positive aspects when that happens, definitely.
Nick, DreamLab Technologies is a successful company. What made it possible for you to successfully place a startup in Switzerland? Like, what did you do right, so to speak? Is that a long story?
It's a super long story.
Okay, all right, we don't have
5 years, and I gotta say, I had a particularly rough start, starting a topic that was not existent at the time being. So that was, what could I say? Persistence and being pain tolerant, maybe.
Intolerant?
Pain tolerant.
Oh, pain tolerant.
Pain tolerant.
Okay.
And just believing in what you do, and just do not listen to the ones that just say this is a crazy idea, even if it's the Swiss government, so to say, and just continue what you do. I don't know what to say. I believe there is no silver bullet, but I believe it's persistence and passion, if I could summarize it.
And what was that bit of a framework that you wish would have existed when you started?
A framework of this, which is just starting, a framework of, I don't know, coaches, someone who could actually tell you, hey, that's a great thing, but be aware it's going to cost you this, and it's going to be long hours, and it's not going to be 12 months, it's going to be 12 years until you run 4 continents. A bit of a help and a bit of a goodwill, and maybe a bit of a courage to just give it a try. I remember winning my first security auditing was a exercise in itself, because nobody wanted to have a pen test back in the 96, 97. I looked at the people, you want to have a pen test? They looked at me like, no, we're all fine. And so I really tried to get this first appointment at a rather large company, and I got this appointment. And I think the trick, and I want to share this, I don't share this a lot, but now online, so it will be shared. So what I did, I had the appointment at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I social engineered my way in at 7 o'clock in the morning, right to the meeting room, waiting for my host. And that was my pitch, and it worked.
Wow. All right. Now, Lieutenant General, with the CYD campus, which is the Swiss Armed Forces vehicle for promoting startups, what is the focus there? And do you already have some success stories that you can share?
The focus is really on connecting Swiss Armed Forces with academia and small innovative firms. I think one problem for us is when we work with startups, I think it's fair to say we're a bit slow and complicated as armed forces. Our procurement process is not the fastest, and I'm hearing from startups that it takes a year, a man year, or a person year actually, to fill in an RFI or RFP. So that's not very promising for small companies. And CID is really here to bridge the gap and get in contact with small companies. Their focus right now is on ETH and EPFL. But then, as I said before, you have this cyber startup competition.
Yeah.
And for the first time, they actually had a company which came up with a product, and that's promising for those small companies, because they then afterwards can sell to Swiss Armed Forces and get to actually into contact and can sell the product to us. The focus going forward will be actually the issue for us is still Cyber Defense Campus. They have ideas, small companies. The issue is still how do we bring it into armed forces? So that's something which we have to focus on also for other innovative ideas. So it's not enough to have just an MVP or a demonstrator. We need a product which is really then in action at the armed force. And that's something we have to focus on going forward.
And do you already collaborate with startups, Swiss startups?
We do not as much actually I wanted to, as said before during my speech. Not enough, and there is a huge gap for those startups to get in contact with us, as mentioned before.
Okay.
What we try to do is find integrators who work then with innovators to actually bridge the gap.
So it's not that you rely less on the Swiss startups. It's just that maybe the communication is still a bit slow, or
Or we're
could be
just too
faster.
complicated and too slow for them.
Yeah, that's possible. Okay, so all right, I just want to do a quick time check because I was not following the time. So I am going to Katka. You're nodding your head, so we can keep going, or shall we start taking questions? Okay, all right, great. Let's take it. Yes, the microphone should come to you in just a moment. There it is.
Hello, I'm Giorgio. All the speakers mentioned the lack of funding for Swiss startups. And on the other hand, we see some venture capitals doing a good job. We have Wingman Ventures that also not only provides capital, but what you were talking about before, this funders experience. We have Swisscom Ventures that does a good job. But I think one of the problems here in Switzerland is when the state starts to get involved. The question is, do we really need the state to do something? And my question is, do you think that the sort of this failure or this market failure that is identified as VCs not investing enough money or not giving enough confidence to Swiss startup is enough to require an intervention or a more heavy intervention by the state, as Israel or the US are doing specifically in cybersecurity?
Thanks for the question. I think one of the big issues that I see is that you have great venture capital firms in Switzerland and really also serial entrepreneurs that are reinvesting in the next generation of startups. But in cyber specifically, you do not have that. You don't have serial entrepreneurship in cyber. So what we faced early days when we raised our first round was that we were confronted with like very, very knowledgeable individuals and venture capitalists, but that had no basic understanding of cryptography, of basic like security terminology. And so it's very difficult in a very deep tech topic to find someone here locally that can really challenge you on the right technology thing. So the only matrix that they're looking at is traction, typically. So what's your market traction, how much revenue you have, how many customers you have. But in a deep tech space, again, we have long sales cycles. This is not typically what an early stage company should focus on, because they have maybe game-changing technology that they should focus on really levers that bring them to a large scale, and instead of acquiring little by little customers. And I think this is a bit the problem that many companies are now forced to go abroad to find money that adds value, as smart money from, again, industry insights or also from this know-how that we're missing.
Anyone add? No, nothing. Okay, all right. Thank you, Sandra. All right, more questions. Here we go.
Hello, my name is Dmitry. Thank you very much for your presentation. I have two questions. The first is on productivity enhancing effects of cybersecurity. So to say, when is the use of cybersecurity productive and increase the value of the company, and at what point it destroys the value and constrains innovation? Maybe you can give me some explanations on this topic. And the second question, so we talked about general purpose technologies like AI and blockchain, and for these technologies you need long-term and consecutive support. And does Switzerland has this type of agency that supports technologies in long-term, like DARPA model, like does InnoSwiss have this role, or should it have this role in the future? Thank you very much.
So I'm very kindly taking the first question because it plays into my hands, what I spent my days on. I think historically security has always been made by, let's say, the very geeky parts of companies, like the security officers and IT in general. In my view, we see a big shift in some industries more than in others, that security is really owned also by the business side. And I think this is a very, very highly needed development because, because something is secure in our space, because you use hardware, which is considered as the most secure for authentication topics, doesn't mean necessarily it's the smartest thing to use, because smart users will find detours around it, and it's gonna make the whole system void. So I think it's extremely important to have a diversity of users in view, again, when touching the consumer or the user or the citizen directly. And this is what we are passionate about at Future A to do, actually. I don't know if someone wants to add. Or
I'd like to double down on this, and yes, when you think cybersecurity out of a business perspective, it actually can be an enabler, and we see many inhibiting security technologies. That's also a start factor of not getting adopted, and they should not be founded. In today's world, cybersecurity should be an enabler for business. Yet again, there is one thing, let's take 2, 3, 4 steps back and look at this on a more global perspective. I like the analogy of the climate shift. We do know that the climate shift is happening. We do have experts telling us what to do, yet still we fail to take action. Now, if I take this analogy to cybersecurity, we are all driven by features. We are driven by digitalization. We love the digital transformation. We love all those nice features. But somehow, whenever it comes to cybersecurity, nobody loves the topic anymore. And when you look at the digital transformation projects, usually they have no cybersecurity part in it. When I ask the project manager, wouldn't it be a good idea to have cybersecurity? He looks at me and says, no, but you have those interfaces. This could be like critical. I says, oh, okay. Yeah, but you know, when I calculate this, I get a red business case. I will not be able to pass it through management. I will not get the funding for it. And I believe this is a fundamental, important thing. We should start to pay the real price for the goods that we use, both in food, cars, and digital transformation.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'm passionate about that.
Yes, I can tell. We have time for one more question. He's guy in the back.
I'm Pierre Dodwall. Thank you for the opportunity. I'd like to touch on a slightly different topic of cybersecurity, which is quantum computing. There seems to have been a few breakthroughs over the past couple of years, and we realize that a lot of our, military, government agencies or banks still seem to not be approaching this topic with all its seriousness. So I was just wondering maybe if you can, and that is a question for Lieutenant General Süssli, really if we can understand a little bit better the state of quantum computing and what can startups do to help implement like quantum resistant algorithms where needed.
It's not an easy question, as you know. I think the state of quantum computing at armed forces is we observe it. That's what we do at the moment. We do not have our own program to invest or research in quantum computing. What we definitely know, it's going to break encryption codes going forward, asymmetric codes, and that concerns us. So we're more on the side of protecting our data and improving encryption. Then, as said before, we had Arma Swiss Research and Technology. They closely observe startups in that area, but there is no systematic or systemic investment in such companies, unfortunately.
Okay, and
if I may add, sorry to hijack this, but I just want to make a little bit of an advertisement. We do have quantum computing research and companies in Switzerland. We do have startups in Switzerland. They're also on the Swiss cybersecurity startup map, and they're really, really worthwhile to follow.
Any more thoughts? Quantum computing over there? Okay, great. So I believe we are out of time. But before we say goodbye, I think Nicole has something sweet coming your way. So with that, thank you again, all of you, for your time, for your insights. And we're going to now exit stage right. I'm up on the stage. So in order to meet these startups, I'd like to invite Patricia Gall to the stage. She is FinTech Senior Manager at Kickstart Innovation. Patricia, it's all you.
Hi, everyone, and first of all, good evening. Great to have everyone here. Tonight, we will hear from 4 cybersecurity startups, which have had a great impact in the Swiss and international ecosystem. Regarding who the startups are, they're quite diverse. Some of them are from our current Kickstart 21 FinTech and InsurTech focus area. Some of them are our alumni, and some of them our ecosystem partners. Kickstart has been very involved in the cybersecurity ecosystem since 2016, working together with startups and corporate partners in order to bring the innovative and efficient solutions in the market. We will start tonight with the first startup. It's SciSec. We can have it here, with Massimo Lucchina, who is the Vice President of Business Development.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. SciSec stands for cybersecurity, of course. We are a startup based in Lausanne, and we deal with confidentiality, integrity of data and systems. It's like when you need to build a house, you don't build a small house and then you start adding pieces and protect them. You want to build it from scratch. This is exactly what we're doing. So we do have a full stack software implementation of what is called confidential computing, which is a new emerging cybersecurity environment where we can protect all the data, the running data, the data sets, and the applications. We actually partner with people like Intel AMD. We actually co-engineer with some of those guys our solutions. And our founders have got a background in quantum. They are 2 of the core team of what was the first quantum company sold out of Switzerland, ID Quantic. And so we have a deep expertise in future cryptology, as you mentioned, Liaison General. And we are closing right now raising a fund for our future, and we actually deploy already our solutions in Switzerland with the financial market, with the healthcare and the public administration. So I will be available also later on for few information if you are interested to know about the full systems that we provide. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Massimo. The next startup we will hear from is Decentric. We will have Maximilian Groth, who is the CEO and co-founder. And we will have actually a video from him.
Hi, my name is Max, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Decentric. Collaborating on sensitive data with internal and external parties introduces time-consuming and risky challenges around trust, security, and privacy. It's a process that normally takes months to complete due to the need to involve multiple stakeholders in complex legal, compliance, and technological processes. 2 years ago, Bill Gates said, "What if we had a way to collect data but not reveal individual records?" My co-founder, Stefan, and I asked ourselves this question many times in our previous job at a company which was analyzing and monetizing sensitive telco data around the globe. We exactly had these kind of problems. McKinsey predicts that the overall data sharing market will be a $3 trillion opportunity per year. To enable the interactive analysis of federated sensitive data will be a $70 billion market already in 2025. This market enjoys great momentum supported by corporate and political leaders. Decentric will unlock this value by providing data clean rooms which are secure, compliant, and intuitive to use. One can easily set up a data collaboration environment with unlimited stakeholders. now taking minutes, not months. Decentric offers secure data cleanrooms on demand by leveraging the latest technological advancements in cryptography, the cloud, confidential computing, and privacy filtering techniques. The combination of these technologies sets us apart by making Decentric the first purpose-bound data analytics platform that truly keeps the data encrypted at all times, while the enterprise readiness and performance of confidential computing differentiates us from other encryption-used technologies. Our current platform went live in July this year, and we already have a user base of 30 plus paying organizations from the private and public sector. Currently, 19 of the largest pharmaceutical companies in Europe, such as Bayer and Johnson & Johnson, are using our platform for sales benchmarking purposes in a 5-year ARR deal. We cracked the nut of being able to process EU health data. We are the first regulatory approved platform in Europe to process raw patient data. We also cracked the nut of Swiss banking data, which is already processed via our platform right now. 2 years ago, it was just a what if. Now it's possible in production and growing.
Great to hear Max. He's one of our alumni from Kickstart 2020. The next company that you will hear from is called Anapaya, and I would like to invite on stage the CEO, Martin Bosshardt.
So I have a couple of slides, so that's why I get this clicker. The internet, I think we all agree, internet changed the world, and Anapaya is now changing the internet. That might sound like a very bold statement, but actually there are quite some reasons why this is first necessary, and second, we also have quite some indicators that this is actually happening. So if you look at the internet, it's based on BGP, Border Gateway Protocol. This is the magic sauce that connects all those different networks around the world. The problem about BGP, it's more like a compass. So it gives the data an idea where data is traveling, the direction, but you have no clue what is in between you and the target. So this is if you compare this with traveling, with freight around the world, we all know what happened to Titanic. The direction was good, the route was not so good. And this is also what happens a lot in the internet. BGP really is an old protocol. Cyan now is upgrading the internet. So it's not introducing a new internet, it's just using today's internet and making it better. It introduces a GPS for the internet. So this is how it would look like if you use Cyan. So you know exactly where your data is traveling. This is very important because you can suddenly also say, okay, I would like to have my data staying within this jurisdiction. I would like to use my data traveling not through a satellite. I would like to have my data traveling across the sun to keep the carbon footprint low. So you have all the choices now where you're traveling, where your data are traveling. Now, what's also interesting, the Swiss National Bank decided to upgrade their interbank clearing network with the Cyan technology for a reason. There is interbank clearing will be upgraded to instant payment, and this is not possible with the today's network in use. So we have been building in the last couple of months a new interbank network, which is using this new technology. And you see, if you compare the existing infrastructure with the new Cyan-based infrastructure, we can produce a very resilient network where we use, like, even if you have a link failover, the application doesn't even realize. So the Cyan technology is super resilient, it's super secure, and what is really great, you get an entire new behavior. It's almost like having a leased line across the internet. And this is what we are right now doing. We deploy 320 financial services institutes and firms. We upgrade the new financial services network. And this is the starting point to really revolutionize today's internet. I hope we have soon a conversation on 8K video conferencing together around the globe. Thank you so much.
Unfortunately, I do not have enough hands. The last company we will hear from, I think you have heard this name before in the presentation, it's Exxon, and I would like to invite Carola Hag. She is the CEO of the company. Carola?
Thank you very much, and good evening also from my side. I have to click on the right now. Good. So Lieutenant Chief General Süßli said at the beginning of the presentation, always assume compromise. That's what our customers also have to do, but how to detect the cyber threats that are already in your network. Because many of our customers and their experts, so the Chief Information Officer, they often lack a complete visibility over their network. They have a lot of tools that might help them, but they often create too many false alerts. They also use third-party applications, which they might have even developed, or which they might also develop themselves, but they don't have any idea how to efficiently secure them. And they obviously, as everyone, relies on preventive measures, so on static indicators of compromise, but what happens if the cyber threat is yet unknown to the public? That's exactly where we are coming into play. So we developed, at over 10 years of research at the ETH of Zurich, a software platform that helps companies as PostFinance or, for example, Planzer, to automatically detect cyber threats based on machine learning and big data algorithms. What this means for our customers is that they get a comprehensive visibility over their network and detect cyber threats before it is too late, so before they get the bill for the ransom payment. We significantly reduce the workload for the security teams by enabling them to really focus on the critical alerts and not having to manually crawl through millions of data points. And we are not affected by increasing encryption in the network because our analysis relies on metadata, which is a huge differentiating effect compared to our competitors. And that's the main reason why many customers like PostFinance or Planter already count on us today. And we hope to have many more happy customers joining the group. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. I'm sure now you're thinking, I have so many questions to these guys. How can I get in touch with them? You will find them at the apero after, so you can ask everything that's on your mind, and they will definitely answer to it. Thank you, and wish you a nice evening. Now, the event is not over.
Stage with me really quick, because in my haste to move us along, because we are running a little over, to move us along, I was remiss in telling people about you. So let me just briefly tell you, she has an amazing career background in asset and wealth management between Milano, London, and Zurich, with an avid interest in deep tech and finance. She's worked with leading startups in Silicon Valley and has also developed a number of NGOs in Romania, interesting, on topics such as mental health and spinal cord disabilities. So definitely a lot to talk to you about as well. So
thank
anyway,
you very
Patricia
much.
Gall,
I feel
thank
very
you so much.
humbled. Thank you, everyone. And thank you very much.
All right, thank you. And on that note, Katka, if you'd like to come back and give us those closing remarks.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So thank you guys so much. We heard from many different parties of different topics, and I really hope that you can engage, of course, through the apero, but also for the next 8 weeks, because we are running this program with our startups from Switzerland, but also many other countries. And this is also invitation, because on November 10th, we are going to do a huge celebration here with many different startup pitches and also announcing partnerships with corporates and investors. And so we hope that you can also be one of the corporates, partners, or investors. No pressure. So I would like to thank you so much, of course, to all of the speakers, and have fun in apero, and looking forward to connecting more. Thank you very much.